Hey, thank you very much indeed. So this is Denzil speaking, and you can work out, I guess, that I'm British, and you'll soon figure out Marco's origins when he speaks, and he'll tell you a bit more about that. So let me just sort of say hello, and it's great to be here and to meet all of you. I think what I'll do is introduce myself and then give a little bit about why we wrote this book. Marco can then introduce himself. And then I'll give you just a couple of takeaways. Marco will give you a couple of takeaways. And I think what we would really like then is Q&A, because that gets a lot more interesting. And you get me to speak first because Marco and I are just completely equal authors in this, and we just drew lots. And I don't know if I got the short straw or the long straw, but that's the way it is. So yeah, you can tell I'm a Brit. I've been to 49 states. I've lived in New York. I'm currently in London, which is where I live, and I founded AMR International, a strategy consulting firm 30 years ago. And some people would say we are the leading strategy consulting firm to the events industry. And we've done a lot of M&A work in the past and growth work. But frankly, everything we're doing at the moment is digital transformation, is supporting organizations as they go through the journey of reinventing their vision and changing the organization and the products to meet the new world. So it's a very exciting time and a frightening time. So look, that's me, and that's my background. Just briefly, why we wrote the book. Marco and I come together once a year in Colorado in winter, which is a great time to be there. And you can guess where Marco is right now, looking at that wood paneling behind him. And we sat together and said, we think the events industry needs change. And this was before the pandemic. In fact, it was just on the eve of the pandemic. And we both looked at each other and said, yeah, it's working, but it's not just quite right. Customers aren't happy. Net promoter scores not as high as it should be. People are being successful, but it's losing ground to other forms of media sponsorship, engagement, and so on. So we're going to write a book about it. And then we knew the pandemic was going to come, or something was going to come. And my goodness, we discovered it was an amazing time to write the book. And I don't think we'd change much of what we've written in it. It's just some of those messages are more underlined in red. So look, that's me, my background, and why we wrote the book. Marco, why don't you tell people a bit about yourself?
Sure, I'll be happy to. As you will easily see, I'm not Brit. I'm originally from Argentina. You will see this exotic Latin accent. And a little bit of my background here. I started my career with Apple when I was very, very young. Part of my job was running events for Apple in Latin America. And I immediately realized that I love events. And also, I was not a corporate guy because I was always dreaming with my own entrepreneurial ideas. And I quit Apple to join a B2B media company. And as part of that B2B media company, we launched an events business and also an e-commerce business, almost from scratch, until we were able to exit to strategic buyers. Pearson bought our B2B media business. Giberti Media here in US bought our e-commerce business. And I did a joint venture with Reed Exhibitions, which is one of the largest event organizers. And I was young and naive, and I thought it would be just a couple of years JV and earnout, and it was a 12 years joint venture. During those days, I met with Denzil, who did the due diligence for Reed before they invested in my company. I'm around events in some capacity for more than 25 years. I stopped counting at 500 events because I thought it was a depressive number. But I did a little bit of everything from small events, a couple of thousand people, up to 770,000 people car show in Sao Paulo, which means I saw a little bit of everything. And after my JV with Reed, around 10 plus years ago, I decided that I wanted to go back to my geeky roots and start investing time and resources on tech again. And of course, based on my previous experience as an operator, I started investing on things that I should understand, like B2B media technology or marketing technology, education technology, and of course, live events technology. Because as an organizer, I was always frustrated with technology and how difficult it was to use from the organizer's side. And I did around 50 investments during the last 10 years on those verticals. Some of those investments were really good and interesting and successful. Some of those investments were a total disaster. In both, I learned a lot, and I keep joking now that I was investing in event tech before it was cool, because when I started investing in event tech 10 years ago, most of my organizers' friends that were telling me that I was crazy and stupid and wasting my time. And I decided to write my second book. My first book, I co-wrote it with Jay Weintraub, a good friend and another entrepreneur, founder. And it was about the intersection between tech and live events. The name is The Face of Digital, was in 2017. And as Denzil said, we decided to co-write this book together about reinventing live, thinking that this industry was ready for reinvention and a reset. Couple of learnings from the book. It was a selfish excuse for me to go back to a little bit of an academic mode and talk with smart people around the industry, organizers, investors, founders, entrepreneurs. And I learned a lot during that process, and it was also a great opportunity to share our own ideas. I learned that our thinking that 3 or 4 days for an event is no longer enough, is no longer sustainable, and customers are looking for way more than 3 or 4 days per year from an event experience, from a community experience. And we talk a lot about communities across the book. And we also learned that finally, every single industry stakeholder are rethinking the way to engage with events, and they're rethinking which specific goals should be done face-to-face and which specific goals could and should be done on a digital basis. And that's a massive change in our industry, because it's going to open tremendous opportunities, but also massive challenges. And every single stakeholder that wants to stay around our industry needs to understand which specific topics are almost impossible to replace on a face-to-face basis and which topics are significantly more efficient on a digital way. And I also learned that big tech is talking about hybrid cloud for a while. And now that we're all moving into a hybrid world, events are not going to be isolated from that technology value proposition, which means if you see what Microsoft, Apple, Google, Facebook, Zoom, you name it, are investing on the hybrid cloud model and technology, many of those technologies are going to be very relevant for live event organizers and live events participants. And we should all be paying attention to that. And I think our book is basically trying to open a conversation around those topics. And we said with Denzil, we don't own the crystal ball. We are just sharing our own ideas, and we wanted to open the conversation.
Yeah, great. I think you've said a lot of what's in there, but let me pick up on some of the topics which I think will be interesting for this group. As I said, the events industry was not satisfying its clients and its customers before COVID. Although you would have events that were buzzing and you were making money, there's the net promoter score measured globally by a research company called Explori, showed it to be negative from our paying customers. And so that was something we can't really get away from. And then we've come into this period of no face-to-face, and it shot down really low because the first digital experiments were very often disappointing, because this is an industry that had no experience. So we have customers who are not always satisfied. Some are hostages. They feel they have to be at the event, but they don't necessarily get value from it. We've then got in this problem right now with the pandemic of revenue pressure, because revenue has gone down. Sometimes there is no face-to-face. Digital substitution is limited. And when events come back full on, they're going to come back somewhere between 50% and 90% of what they used to be. So they're going to be smaller on the face-to-face side. There's margin pressure. Smaller events means reduced margins. And also you have to pay for the technology. So what have we got? Customers who aren't entirely happy. We've got revenues down and we've got margins down. That's all tough and frightening. So what is the solution? It opens in chapter 2, and it simply says, it is now a mistake for an event organizer to think that it is an event organizer. And that is a fundamental change in mindset, because if we just think our customers are customers of events, we're not accessing the whole market, or we should really call it the community. We know that at trade shows, 50% of people who sign up don't show up. Well, that other 50% should also be our customers, and we're not going to reach them face to face. We're going to reach them digitally. And that's just starting with those who signed up. You can then look more broadly to those who didn't even sign up. So if you're still thinking like an event organizer, you're not going to be looking at the right market. You're going to be making that too narrow. And then the other thing you need to do is obviously improve the services and broaden the services. And yes, we talk about hybrid and digital and all of this in the book, but just think ahead. That word digital, that word hybrid will not be used. So if you walk around a factory, does the guy who's operating a factory talk to you about the electricity he has? Or in some cases, the pneumatic, they just don't. It's just not relevant. So we're going to find those words are really necessary at the moment, but in the future, we won't consider ourselves to be event organizers. We might, in some cases, consider ourselves to be a community catalyst, which means we are at the heart of the community, and we are going to be providing that community with the services it needs. And that will include the annual celebration in the major physical gathering in Las Vegas or wherever. And it will then have a whole range of other services, most of which will be delivered digitally, electronically, because guess what? People spend most of their lives looking at their iPhone or their device. And again, that term digital, hybrid and so on, that won't be there so much. So the vision is you should not consider yourself to be an event organizer. And it's a major cultural change. And I think we emphasize this in the book. And it means that the organization will have to think differently. We will use different tools. We'll have to learn how to fail quickly. And it's an entire mindset change. So when we're helping people with their new vision, we start by getting some kind of common view as to what the customers are and what we can provide for them. And then you can then try and say, okay, how can we support those customers with new services and different services? And in some ways, that's the easy part. The tough thing then is to have the whole organization believe in it with the culture change and buying into it. And when the organization is excited about a different way of operating, then things start to come more naturally. So it's a time of really great change. And I think I'm just delighted that we wrote the book. And I think we had all those messages in there, and they just seem to be all the more pertinent now we're in this time. So Marco, do you want to add a few other comments from the book, and then we really want to have time for Q&A?
Yeah, I will love to jump into Q&A if there are any questions from the group.
Yes, I think we have some questions. Bill Whitehead, I think you had a question. Do you want to show your face?
Well, sure. I'm happy to do that. Welcome, guys. This is awesome. And Robin, I kudos to you. The events that you're putting on every month just get better and better. And thank you so much. So here's the question. I want to read your book. I'm going to order it as soon as we finish up the meeting today. I'm very curious about all of this, and I'm thinking about the business models. How are they going to change? Are you going to see in-person events where that they're going to charge less if you come in person than if you access online or virtually? Or is the opposite going to be true, and you're going to have specialized content that's going to be created for the in-person events that not everybody is going to be able to take advantage of? I think that personally, somebody else was talking about this earlier. I love my basement office. I haven't missed being on a plane 50 weeks a year. So hotels and all of that, but I know that we are going to see a lot of hybrid changes in the business models, and would love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Great. Let me start. I think that one of the exciting things that we're going to see is exactly that, which is a different business model. And the classic revenue model where trade shows were making 80 or 90% of the revenue with exhibit space, or conferences just with sponsorships and tickets, is going to change, because sellers or sponsors are going to demand a different value proposition, and they're also prepared to pay from a different model. If you talk with the big organizers, the Informas or Reed of this world, they are thinking on a way that they can accelerate their digital revenues dramatically during the next 5 or 10 years. Pre-COVID, this industry was probably 2 or 3% digital revenues. The rest was basically exhibit space, tickets, and the classic stuff that you all know. They're thinking that that is probably going to change into 20 to 25% digital revenue in the next 5 years. And that is billions and billions of dollars moving from traditional revenue around events into some sort of new digital proposal that could include membership, subscriptions, leads, different digital interactions between buyers and sellers. That is a fascinating opportunity, but also a massive challenge for those organizers that are not ready to reinvent their business model. And that's why we believe that it's imperative that you understand the digital value proposition if you want to be a relevant event stakeholder. And that's why we honestly believe that technology is no longer a luxury. It's a clear priority, and investment, not investment only using technology, investment on education for your employees and your teams, understanding the digital world, it's a massive priority now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marco, thanks for quoting that data from Globex, which is our annual survey and forecast for the events industry. Completely agree with those figures. We were 98% analog, and we'll go to being 25% digital, which is a really big change. Now, don't just look at the shiny technology. We've just seen a tech demo and it's great and people like it and so on. You don't just look at shiny technology. Look at what customers need. Who is in my community? What are their business needs? What is the journey? Why did they not sleep at night? How can we solve those problems? And time again, people start by looking at a shiny technology and say, isn't that cool and isn't it great? But they haven't started with the customers need this. What's the best technology for it? So in some events, and certainly not all, you need a marketplace. So if it's a sourcing event for fashion, for toys, for something like that, it makes sense to have a marketplace attached to it. And there are various marketplace softwares. You then look at which one's going to work well. I would suggest that some other types of event, that's not going to be a great thing. So understand the customer need. And then you're going to say the business model, how's that going to change? We're going to have this integrated set of services. And there are examples of what used to be called an event organizer becoming a membership community, whereby you pay a subscription. Marco and I in the book kick around the idea of charging for leads. So leads as a service. So we will charge you per lead, and then you can validate the quality of each one. So there are a lot of points within there, but they're all about different mindset, different ways of functioning. And we have examples in the book, and we see other examples where people are already going down this route. Oh, I just see there's a question there about online versus in person. I'll give you a fantastic example of online only, and those are one-to-one meetings. There's a business called Management Events. They're a case study in the book, quite an innovative Finnish business. They had, I don't know, many dozens or 100 or more events. They have just gone from face-to-face to 100% online. And they're taking market share and they're increasing customer satisfaction. And these are one-to-one meetings, quite often around software, big ticket software discussions and so on. And so they've completely blown up their approach, and they see that as a really interesting way to go and take share from some sleepy folks who aren't moving as fast as them.
Another interesting example that we also cover in the book as a case study is Networker, which is on the fashion industry, from an entrepreneur who sold again his previous business to Reed. And instead of charging traditional exhibit space, he's curating the exhibitors or sellers and charging a transaction fee. And this is quite revolutionary if you think it from that angle, because he's thinking, these are the best brands for my community, and I'm going to give them the space for free. And if they monetize, I'm going to have a revenue sharing on that business model, which is a very, very interesting and innovative approach.
Yeah, and I see a comment about cost per lead being a slippery slope. I agree. However, I think we will see this on occasions, and it also talks fundamentally to value. If we hold our customers hostage, we will find that will come back to bite us. And so if we're not giving value, i.e. they're not getting the leads for what the money they're investing, we will find that we've got a short-term business model.
So Denzil, take us back to like my idiot view of the world. I agree, membership, subscriptions, I want to belong to your club all year. How does your organization start to manage that transition? Like, you always had an events group and they did your events, and like, is this a CMO? Is it a CEO? Is it top down, bottom up? Is it totally changed? How do you start on this path?
So how should you organize yourself? Yeah. Okay. Well, it depends to a great extent what type of business you are in the first place. You may be an organizer with many dozens or hundreds of events, or you may be an association with one event that's paying all the bills, or you could be an integrated media group. So you can't give a one-size-fits-all answer. But just a week or two ago, Marco and I were running a little event around this topic, and there was a strong view from a guy who was perhaps the most digitally focused guy out of digital media of centralize. His view was centralize your skills, take those skills and have them have to have a digital organization with central skill sets. Now, then you had another voice saying, okay, no, you can't do that because you've got to be closer to your customers, and each, whether you're going to, they shouldn't be called event directors anymore, brand manager possibly, but community manager or someone who's actually in the industry is what we should call this role that used to be an event director. They need to be part of the industry. So you can't be too centralized. So because the events industry is so rich in its diversity of business model, structure, level of media we already have, I can't give you a one size fits all. Because you've got, these are successful businesses giving really different answers. So what it means is you've got to understand your circumstance, what's going to make it work for customers, and also where is my organization today? Because you can't just suddenly jump from where you are to an impossible spot overnight. So I'm sorry if that's a frustrating answer, but there isn't a one size fits all. You've got to really think it through in each case.
Let me add my operator's view as a recovering event organizer, Robin. What I used to say to my team when we were running events and we were very young, when I started my business, is that our competitors keep telling that they have 25 or 30 years of experience. And we were young kids and we have 1 or 2 years of experience. And I keep telling my team, they don't have 25 years of experience. They have 1 year repeated 25 times. They're doing the same every single year. They're not innovative. They're not placing bets. They're not investing in disruptive technology and innovation. I think that phrase, which is probably now 25 years old, is more relevant than ever today in our business, because I keep joking from a Star Wars phrase from Yoda that says to Luke Skywalker when he's training Luke, he says, you have to unlearn and learn again in order to become a Jedi. For Star Wars fans, you will understand what I'm saying here. The unlearn and learn idea, it's critical here. If we believe that we understand this industry because we have 20 or 30 years of experience like Denzil or me, we're totally wrong. This is a completely new scenario. It's a completely different cultural mindset into the industry. And the millennials and what I call the Google generation, they're not going to allow gray answers about ROI or cost per lead. They want to understand return of investment from live events from a different angle, and they're going to demand that. And that is very, very important to understand for you. If you're an event organizer, you need to speak their language. It's no longer about I'm going to build a great show and people will come and life is going to be beautiful.